Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. So today we are joined by a very special guest, Isaac. Is this the right side of my screen?
No, no,
um,
it's the other side.
Isaac.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about our H3 journeys. So for some context, Isaac took a science H3 as well as an econs H3, which was a modular course. While I did a arts research H3. So for both Isaac and I, the science and arts H3 that we took were research projects at NUS. So we thought that today we would want to share a little bit more about our experience and our journey with you guys, as well as the application process and any struggles that we might have had. So this was born out of a conversation that we were having about our journey and the struggles that we had, and we thought that, personally speaking, when I was doing my project, I definitely did feel that it would have been helpful to have someone to talk to who had been through the experience, who had gone through what it was like, and overcome all the problems. We didn't necessarily manage to overcome every problem we've encountered, but I did think that this would be an interesting video and hopefully an informative one for you guys to see. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Okay, so Isaac, you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your project as well as the rubrics.
Sure. Hi everyone. I'm Isaac, and the H3 I took was the NUS Science Research H3. So for a bit of context, this H3 comprises three components: written reports that accounts for 70% of your grade, 10% of assessed lab work, as well as 20% an oral presentation. So I had to undergo lab work. I worked at the Faculty of Engineering in NUS, and after that, I had to compose a scientific paper, which was then reviewed by a panel of professors in that field, who were the same professors who interviewed me for the last part of the research H3, where I was asked to present my findings as well as have a Q&A session with them to assess my understanding of the project. Yeah, so after completing all those components, all of that was added up and a grade was given to me.
Okay, so for myself, my H3 was literally just researching and writing a 4K word essay, which would be graded by a fixed rubric. And it would be graded by both the professor who was mentoring me as well as an external marker. So I didn't know who the external marker would be, but yes, so that's how mine was graded, and that would be 100% of my grade.
As I said earlier, this video is about our H3s, and for those who may not be familiar with the system here, how it works in JC is that you take subjects from H1, which is like a basic level, to H2, which is the more intermediate level, and H3, which is so-called advanced level. And some people say that it's supposed to be compared to first year of uni standards. So a lot of the perceptions of a H3 is that, oh, it's super difficult, you have to be super smart to take it. And what's different about H3 as opposed to H1 and H2 is that when you enter JC, you're expected to have decided on the H1 and H2 that you're going to be taking for your 2 years of JC. But for a H3, you don't get it until you are offered it, if you do rather well, at the end of J1, and you will be able to take the H3 in your J2 year. So that's what happened to me, as well as Isaac, although Isaac did start his science research project a lot earlier.
I knew that I wanted to take my science research H3 even before coming to JC.
I only really decided that I should give applying for a H3 a shot when the teacher asked around if there was anyone interested, and I thought maybe
science research was something that I did in secondary school and I really liked it. So when I found out that you could take science research as an examinable subject in JC, I was really excited to give it a try and to push myself and see how I would do in H3 research. I ended up taking a different research project as compared to my previous research projects, meaning to say that it was in a very different field. So all my previous projects were in medical science, so it was all very biology related. But the H3 that I took in JC was actually in the field of computing and robotics. So that was something new that I managed to experience, and I'm very grateful for that. There wasn't any great requisite for me to apply. You just had to register in March of J1, and then I had to take a aptitude test at NUS. So it was a really hard science test, and only if you managed to pass that test were you able to enter the science research program and take it as a H3. So I guess one thing to take note about science research is that they have much earlier deadlines compared to all the other H3s. So you have to start applying in March, and the timeline basically is really much earlier than every other H3. So you have to be very on task, like once you enter JC, if you know that this is something that you want to take. So I guess I would take note of that.
With regards to my experience about research, I have very little experience before this. So the last paper that I wrote before this was when I was 15, and it was about the Wars of the Roses in medieval English history, parallel to Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones took inspiration from the Wars of the Roses. Surprise, surprise. It was a definitely very fun paper to write, but I do not feel that it was a good representation of potential academic ability, just because as 15-year-olds, we were not very well versed at what citations were or what JSTOR was, and definitely we were not able to cover a very good depth of what the Wars of the Roses really were, because we were just like reading stuff from Wikipedia and like pulling random stuff off the net. I wouldn't say that there's like a great requisite to apply. I know that some H3s do say that, oh, you have to like get a certain minimum grade to apply for H3, or you have to, I don't know, hit a certain level of rank points for your promos to be able to apply. That was not the case for me, because I do think that my school definitely takes into consideration the percentile. And although my grades were not amazing at the time, my percentile was around 80 to 90 for most subjects, which meant that I was in like the top 10 to 15% most of the time for my main H2 art subjects. And so when I applied, they actually used my CT grades to apply, and these were the exams that I had taken back in July. So in case you think that you could just mess around with your CTs and then get offered a H3 later on in the year, I think it would be harder for you to justify your academic capability with poor CT grades and yet with studying promo performance, just because of the criteria for selecting you into the H3 program is based on a consistent academic performance. So while I'm not saying that you need to be like the top student or like a stellar performer to get in, I do think that it's really important to be consistent throughout the year. Personally, I did feel that the structural process of applying was definitely a little bit messy. How I first applied was that after my teacher told me about the documents necessary to apply, I filled everything up, and then I started researching for a proposal that I would write for my H3. So at the time, I think I chose the overall topic, the UN as an instrument in, I think, a military conflict. And at the time, I hadn't decided which region or which conflict I would like to study in detail. So I kind of asked a few seniors about it, but I wasn't really close to those seniors, and they were from different schools, and the H3 that they had taken was quite different from the H3 that I was applying for. So I did feel that I didn't really have a lot of guidance on this, but basically what they told me was just keep researching, just keep checking. There's going to be a certain event, going to want to research about it a little bit more in detail. I won't go too much into detail about what exactly my research project was about, but definitely I was very intrigued by the combination of both a organization just starting out and a very, very complex political territorial conflict. And on top of that, I was very stricken by this need to seize the opportunity given to me. I knew that opportunities like mentorship by a professor wouldn't come very frequently again in my lifetime. And I basically just wanted to challenge myself in the biggest way possible. So I looked around me and I thought, what are the most complex disputes, and what are the biggest issues in the world that I haven't been given the opportunity to study in my syllabus yet? And it so happened to be issues that are ongoing in the Middle East. And so I was thinking to myself, what's the most complex historical issue, like territorially and politically, that I have not studied? And it is pretty much the Arab-Israeli conflict. That was my thought process going in. I was like, I want to study this because it's hard, and I don't know anyone who has done hard stuff like this. I don't propose that you choose your research question or your research focus this way, but I definitely enjoyed myself a lot reading to it. I learned a lot of things from it. So regarding complications, I did feel that things got a little bit messy after I had gotten in, and they made me create an account on the NUS portal and then send in a whole bunch of documents. And in my rush, because I was about to leave the country for vacation, I forgot to include a photo for my matriculation card that I was meant to send by a certain date. I think I came back from sandboarding at the Lancelin Dunes to 5 emails and 20 missed calls saying oh, if we don't get this picture, you're not going to be able to be accepted into the program because we can't confirm that you have accepted our offer. I was super, super panicky that day. And so we had just come back from the dunes, sandboarding, and I was all sweaty and flushed. I had sand all over my face, and I just grabbed my sister and I was like, quick, there's a white wall, help me take a picture. And that, my friends, is how I got the picture on my NUS matriculation card. But yeah, I think that was the only real complication that I had.
Okay, so after applying and sitting for the test and getting in by passing the test, we needed to decide whether we wanted to take it as a H3 or as an enrichment program, because there was an option to do either one. And here's where I faced a bit of complications, because my school didn't encourage me to take it as a H3 in the beginning, because it was something that no other student had done before, and they were really not very familiar with taking it as a H3. But then it took a bit of convincing. I finally got approval to take it as a H3, and the school helped me to facilitate the registration process, so that was quite okay. After getting a place, after passing the entrance test and all that, we actually had to write to the professors in NUS who were doing research in our topic of interest. So there was a list of professors on the online portal, and it was up to us to approach them. So we had to write a cover letter, a resume, and state why we wanted to do this project, and sort of draft out a proposal on what we wanted to do in their labs. I think in contrast to all the other H3s, all the MOE H3s, as well as all the course-based external H3s, the application process for research is definitely much more tedious. You have to do a lot more, there are a lot more steps as compared to, for example, my econs game theory H3, where the school basically facilitated everything, and that was really smooth. So I guess for this, you have to be really on task. So I was actually in the States during the period where we were supposed to apply and write to professors. So I had to do all of that online through email, and it was kind of stressful because places were filled up very fast. So you had to move quickly if you wanted to get a particular topic that you wanted, because understandably there are limited resources in the labs and there's a finite amount of students they can take. So you really had to, sort of assert why they should take you in to their lab to use their resources.
My application was not very long. I think I even put it in 3 paragraphs. By the way, this is a proposal for the project that I would do, so it wasn't meant to be me trying to write the project without help and seeing whether my professor would like to mentor me. No, it was a proposal about the topic and the research question that I would want to do. And at the time, my research question that I proposed was how effective was the UN in ensuring peace and security in the Arab-Israeli conflict, which on hindsight was a very naive and very generic topic sentence and question to be asking in my proposal, because things like how you evaluate effectiveness, how you evaluate peace and security can be written about in full essays themselves. I don't have to write an essay about Arab-Israeli conflict. I could just write about how ambiguous the word effectiveness is when used in evaluating any given situation. What I basically talked about in my proposal was, first of all, what research I had done about the Arab-Israeli conflict, and then how I saw the UN's intervention as useful / non-useful, or effective / non-effective, as well as the main thrust and the main argument of my essay, which was that the UN was eventually kind of prevented from being effective due to a lot of extenuating factors. Definitely, these points were a lot more refined in my final extended essay, but these were the points in my proposal. And like I said, it was really short, like 3 paragraphs, but I did include a lot of citations and the historians that I had researched on about, and I think that might be really useful because your professors are definitely going to want to know that you can do basic research.
Question 4. I was very excited after being offered my H3. I applied for a AI and robotics H3 and was very excited to know more. But I realized that there was actually quite a big gap in understanding from transitioning to the normal science that we learn to research-based computing. I had to teach myself a whole new programming language in a matter of weeks because I was expected to know how to program going into the project. So I definitely faced a very steep learning curve. I also had to adjust to the hectic lab schedule. I had to travel to NUS. It was not near to where I was staying, and there were definitely a lot of sacrifices I had to make. I had to sacrifice time to study, sacrifice time to sleep, sacrifice time for meals, and even at the end of the year I had to sacrifice my December holidays while working on the project, because I needed to be in the lab to collect data sets and do experimentation. I actually only had 1 week of holidays after working in the lab for the majority of December, and in that week I spent it writing my research paper, which took out a lot of time. So writing my research paper, having it vetted by my mentors, making changes, and finally submitting it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of sacrifice involved in doing such a taxing H3 such as science research. So I would definitely urge you to really ask yourself whether you have that drive to push you to continue, because when I was working long nights at the lab, even up to like 11 p.m. sometimes, it did feel as if it wasn't worth it sometimes when I was very tired, very alone. What really kept me going is that I wanted to finish what I started. I wanted to see whether my results actually were conclusive, and I definitely didn't want to get an absent grade on my cert after working so hard so I couldn't give up, and that was really what honed that resilience in me that helped me get through this.
When I first got the offer, I was really shocked. I never expected to get the offer. I kind of just applied out of chance, kind of like seeing how far my application would take me. I didn't really expect to actually get it. So after I got the offer, I was really excited about it, and I told a bunch of my friends, including some family friends, who advised me to start my research early, and they told me that if I wanted to, I should ask around and get the opinions of some more academically experienced people. So I eventually managed to get a one-to-one individual interview with Bilahari Kausikan, who, as some of you may know, has very extensive personal research in the Middle East. So when I met him in person, I was definitely very, very nervous. I asked him a lot of general ambiguous questions like how effective was, etc., which I kind of regret today, because if I could go back in time, I would definitely ask him a lot more straightforward and pressing questions. But that didn't really appertain to my research. After that interview, he also gave me the context of a few other people who were academics in the field of Middle East research, and I emailed them and asked them a few questions and got some perspectives from all of them, and I definitely tried to compile them and put them into a document and write out some more questions that I had for when I finally met my professor, so we could discuss it and go through it together. Because I was not aware of like how strict my professor would be or what were the expectations and demands set on me. So I just wanted to be as prepared as possible.
Question 5.
The first time I met my mentors was probably in February of J2, and I remember that I had to take a day off school for this, and my teacher in charge from my school came to join me, and she sat in for the entire duration of the induction program. Basically, how it worked was that we had a general briefing where all the people in the country at our age who were taking this H3 program would attend the briefing together. So this included subjects like history, economics, literature. I think they had like languages as well. So they had like Tamil and Mandarin. And definitely I think there might have been one or two who were doing English research as well. I can't remember, but basically it's a humanities research program. So they sat us all down, gave us a talk through about expectations, about what facilities we were allowed to use, deadlines, stuff like that. This was also the day where we would get a little bit of a tour around the campus, and they would show us where things in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences were.
For the science research program, we actually had a science research congress as a way of inducting us into the program, and this was at NUS. It was sort of like an exhibition of the projects that previous batches had done, and they also had talks to tell us how the whole thing was going to go down and how it was going to be like. And then after that, we got to meet our research mentors, our research professors at a later date in the respective labs. So I work at the Faculty of Engineering in NUS.
Professor was a little bit intimidating and scary just because he's super, super tall. He's a military history professor at NUS, and apparently he taught my history teachers in JC. So things that they warned about him was that he was very strict. He wanted his documents and his submissions always of a very, very high quality, and that he would always demand like punctuality and discipline out of his students, because apparently he used to be in the military in Canada. I was really, really afraid of him, but later on as the project progressed, I realized that he really is a very, very nice guy. He's very understanding towards me, and he was super nice. I remember one time after I had submitted one of my drafts, and I was feeling a little bit insecure about it because I wasn't sure if the direction that I was going was, a good one to be taking. But I had tried very hard to research about it, and I was just very, very afraid that he would reject it. And I came to that meeting like shaking and really scared and thinking he's definitely going to scold me. I just know it. He actually was super sweet to me. He said like, you're actually a really good writer, and I think that the work that you've been doing is actually really good. I just have a few comments to make, but otherwise I think that the work that you have been doing is good. And I was so taken aback. I was so shocked by that. It really, really made my day, and it gave me so much self-confidence, and I was able to kind of like validate my efforts a little bit more after that. I do think that it's something that I have to work on personally, but that was definitely super nice of him.
I quickly found out that working in the lab was actually a very independent process. I was working in a post-grad research lab, so everyone else was very busy with their own projects, and even my research professor, he was very busy, had to fly overseas often, so I didn't get to see him a lot. So I really learned the value of independent um, independent work, and learning to be self-sufficient, learning to approach strangers or other people in the lab for help when I needed it. And I'm also very grateful for the mentors who were willing to, teach a noob like me when I knew nothing about computing. So that was really um, helpful and really instrumental to the success of my research in this program.
So as I said earlier, the professor had kind of assigned us overarching topics that we had to propose more specific topics in our application process already. And then after that, he would choose which projects he would want to do, and that's how he, decided which students he wanted to take on and mentor. Essentially, we were already given fixed starting points dependent on what our proposals were on about. So for me, mine was on the Arab-Israeli conflict and the UN's involvement in that. So, but as I said earlier, the research question that I had posed in my proposal was definitely one that I changed along the way.
So for my particular research project, we were given fixed starting points. So my research professor gave me a brief outline of what the starting point should be. But then after that, he told us we were free to branch out into different areas and find and figure out our own research questions by ourselves. So I actually found and decided on my research question quite late. So I think that throughout that process, it really got me thinking about which particular aspect I wanted to, go into and specialize in, and make that the topic of my research paper. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, it's very multifaceted. You don't have to rush in and decide and lock in on a research question right away. It sometimes comes when you're investigating different aspects of the project. Well, I guess one of the greatest challenges would be gathering up the strength to travel to NUS so often. It was quite far, and basically time management in general, because it really does take up a lot of your time. I remember the time when I was supposed to submit my oral defense. I was busy preparing my slides and rehearsing, and that coincided with my block tests in school and also the exams of my other H3. So it really required a lot of time management for me to be on task and to not neglect one or the other. And really being in the lab all the time does take away time from studying, especially in J1, but thankfully J1 didn't have that many topics yet, so I guess I was able to cope better. I think one thing that really helped me get through this were the other people who were working in the lab. So they were other students in the lab as well who were working on similar projects as me, but they were taking it as enrichment programs. So they really helped me get through it and get through all those long days and tough time.
Definitely what I have to say about the whole process is that there's a lot of research that goes into everything. I mean, of course, it's redundant to say because it is a research project, but what I really mean is that you have to kind of be brave enough to admit to yourself when you think you might be going down the wrong path, or when what you're doing may not necessarily be super relevant to the focus and flow of your essay. So for example, say in my field of research, because there's a lot of material, you just have to get through it. So you tend to read a lot about a certain thing, and you kind of burrow down a black hole and read about this one thing, and you write a lot about it before you realize when reading your full essay that it's not the focal point and it doesn't really cohere in the general fluidity of your paper. And then you kind of have to be daring and brave with yourself and tell yourself hey, this was good research, this might have been good writing, but I have to cut it out because I only have 4,000 words and I have to, cover the breadth. I think there's always a little bit of a dilemma in the process about whether you should prioritize breadth over depth. I definitely do remember that there were times when I had done a little bit of research about the impacts of certain leadership styles on the process and continuity of the conflict. So there was one point in time in which I had written like copious amounts about the influence of like President Nasser and Yasser Arafat, and then only to realize that, you know, I had gone a little bit too far in that analysis and it wouldn't necessarily gel very well with the whole argument that I had been moving forward with in my paper in entirety. So I'm not sure if I'm losing you guys here, but basically what I'm saying is that there were times in which I had to cut out a lot of research that I did, even though it was relevant, just because I had limitations and I needed to know how to work within them. Well, personally for me, that was a huge challenge when I was doing my research, but I guess for everyone it's really different.
I was extremely proud when I finally finished my research paper and my experimentation and was done with my oral defense. Because it was such a laborious process, the success really felt so much sweeter to me. But I guess one thing that I would like to point out about deciding where to stop and when was enough is really that it's dependent on the deadlines. So in research, we know that, you know, there's never enough research that can be done. There's always something more, another experiment you can take to further fine-tune your findings. But what really helped me decide that, okay, this was enough, was the deadline law. So actually on my very last day of working at the lab, it was actually on Christmas Eve, and I was about to fly back to my hometown to spend Christmas with my family. And in the morning, I was collecting a data set. I actually wanted to collect one last data set, but when I looked at the time, I realized that, I needed to go to the airport now. So I decided, okay, that's enough. I'll just work with what I have and start writing my paper. So I guess it's really important to know your limitations as well, because you're only given a very short period of time to do your research, actually.
So I feel that how I decided on the final product wasn't really an ideal way. It was more like I have hit around 4K words, I have covered most of the breadth that I proposed to cover. I am able to like go in depth to certain issues in which I had set out to cover. My professor seems kind of happy with my essay. I am running out of time. I'm going to submit it now. That was kind of like the thought process behind me eventually submitting it. It wasn't like, yes, I am satisfied, I am content with the research that I was setting out to do. It was more like, yeah, I think this can pass and I don't really have much more time. Like, no other choice, let's just go. I was lucky enough to have finished before the deadline so that I could make some tweaks here and there, finish up a little bit on the formatting and the citations, and yeah, I'm kind of happy that things turned out the way they did. I was nearing a part of my A-level journey that I was very, very stressed about. Like, I definitely felt that I had to focus a lot more on my H2 subjects, and so yeah, I was just kind of happy to get it out of the way. My thoughts on this are that, doing a H3 subject doesn't automatically make you a pro at whatever you're going to be doing. And definitely I feel that the people who are doing H3s are not like much better or worlds apart from the people who do not take H3. Doing a H3 is a personal decision. It arises out of a personal interest, a personal passion that you have about a subject. And just because you don't have it doesn't mean that you are bad at the subject in its examinable form. And if you didn't qualify to take a H3, I don't think that says a lot about your ability to do well at the subject either. I mean, we just all have our own different times and experiences to have, and perhaps it's just not your time. Also, I've realized that a lot of people think that it helps to take a H3 for uni. Like, a lot of people say that, because I'm applying to like Ivies or Oxbridge, I want to take a H3 so that I'll be more highly considered. I'm I'm not too sure about Ivies or like US unis, but first of all, they literally take SATs. I don't think they're going to be concerned about what your A-level score was or what H3 you took, because I don't think they'll even care. And for Oxbridge, while definitely certain subjects, I think more science-based or math subjects do kind of consider it. For art subjects, like personally for history, applying for Oxford, I was never asked like, you know, what grade did you get for your H3, and they never asked like what research project did you do or what was the main focus of your research. For UK unis, I find that most of the time all they really care about are your 3 H2s. Really worth saying that whether or not you get a H3, your focus should always be on your 3 main H2 subjects, because those are the things that UK unis are looking out for. So honestly, people always tell me that they believe that it helps for uni. Trust me, it really depends on the subject that you're intending to take at uni. Please go do your research and check out if a uni has explicitly stated out terms like these. If not, then don't assume that it always applies. And definitely it does not always apply.
I guess the biggest myth that a lot of people have a wrong conception of is that doing a H3 really helps you a lot in uni applications. Well, I'm going to tell you that that's definitely not true. It certainly wasn't taken into account when I applied for uni. So I think what really a H3 helps you do is it helps you explore that particular path at a higher level. So it gives you an idea of how it might be like if you were to pursue that in university. And for me personally, it helped me a lot because I thought that, you know, AI was something that was very interesting that I might want to consider pursuing in uni. But after doing it, I realized that, hey, maybe this wasn't something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I guess my H3 was very rewarding in the sense that it helped me figure out what I didn't want to do in university. And I do want to say that just doing a H3 doesn't automatically make you a pro in that subject, and that you shouldn't be pressured to, you know, want to pursue that subject or major in it just because you've had a H3. It's really to help you explore more about yourself and get to know yourself more, as well as, you know, a lot of character building along the way, because you have to learn a lot about working independently and how the real world is actually like by working in an actual postgraduate lab.
I also do feel that time management is really important, because we were given the timeline pretty early on about when the essays were to be due, and I did propose for myself draft 1 due February, draft 2 due March, etc., etc. So essentially I had about a month between each meeting with my professor to refine the draft even further and to add on certain research that I had found as I went on. And it got to a point where by the time I was at like draft 5 to 6, like the drafts that I was putting out to him were more or less the same. I have to say about my journey during H3 research in history is that imposter syndrome is really real. I feel that I've definitely kind of pedestalized the idea of someone taking a H3 to a certain extent. Like in J1, a lot of people would always talk about previous seniors who had graduated and saying like, oh, that person was so good at this subject, like she took a H3 and, you know, she was really amazing at it and stuff. And I always thought it to mean that, you know, it was a mark of success. I mean, it definitely is to a certain extent. It's an achievement, but it is not the only mark of success or possible academic achievement you could ever get in your life. Like, for example, as I mentioned earlier, if you do a H3 and you get a distinction, but you don't end up with 3 H2As, that really does complicate things for you in terms of uni admissions, because your H2s are the things that your unis are going to be considering for admissions even before we move on to issues like a H3. Personally speaking, I struggled a lot with feeling like a fake, just because a lot of my research was reading a lot of what had been written on the subject beforehand and synthesizing that into ways that were relevant to my research question. In this light, I really did feel like a fake because I felt like I was just copying someone else's work. It wasn't like I was making any new discoveries or making any new, unheard of before analysis on my part, because I always had felt that going into research meant that you had to invent something new, you know, something out of the box that no one else has thought of before. But that's not the case, because when I told my dad this, and my dad's an academic, by the way, he was telling me that I shouldn't be too hard on myself, because honestly, people don't usually make their own research or, you know, come up with original ideas until they get to probably the honors thesis level, or maybe even a master's degree. And even then, what they come up with or what they invent in their writing is only a limited extent. Like, you can't expect to, at 19 or 18 years old, you know, come up with an entirely new, unheard of theory that no other academics who's probably in their 40s and 50s have written about before. If you do a H3 and it's a research H3, don't go in thinking that your research is going to be groundbreaking and new and innovative. Just do the research that means something to you, that will allow you to learn the most in the journey of doing it. Like, honestly, I do feel that that was what I did by choosing my topic on the Middle East and the Arab-Israeli conflict in particular. And that's why I really, really enjoyed the process, because it just really felt like I was learning a lot about interests that I had not had prior time otherwise to pursue. And I feel like you definitely have to take a lot of pride in the process of learning, rather than putting all your achievement and all your heart into the final product necessarily. What I think is really important about going into a H3 is to genuinely care a lot for the subject and for the topic that you're researching on. So if you don't care for history, or you don't care for like the science that you're studying, and you just want to take the H3 for like, what would you take? I can't really stress this enough, but you have to spend a lot of time for like arts, humanities, research projects, combing through libraries, like, you know, actually getting on your knees and searching through the shelves, taking down reference numbers, you know, going on JSTOR, going on Taylor and Francis. If you're not into this whole like reading a lot, analyzing a lot, then don't do this to yourself.
I guess my advice would be to be realistic in going into research. I think a lot of people, they either have a very high expectation of the research that they're going to produce. So like, people might think you'll find out a groundbreaking cure to a certain disease, or make some amazing advancement in that short period of time that you have. And I would like to tell you that that's definitely not true. In the slightly less than a year's worth of time that you have, your research is actually going to be quite limited. So I guess in that sense, you should stay humble in your expectations of what you're going to produce. But at the same time, you should also take pride in what you're doing, because no matter how small an advancement it is in that particular field, it is an advancement after all. It is something unique and new that you have produced. So I would urge you to, you know, take pride in the grind and the learning process, because at the end of the day, research is built on collaboration by many different people. Like, if you read scientific journals or papers, they're often authored by a long list of people. And who knows, maybe your small advancement or small discovery in a research, in the particular research field that you're doing, might pave the way for further bigger advancements in the future. So I guess don't expect to change the world, but don't expect to not change the world as well. Be humble while being proud of what you're doing. Yeah, so I hope that gives you a sort of understanding of what science research is like.
I definitely do feel that if you're passionate about the subject that you study, if you have been studying consistently enough to, you know, be accepted into the program, and if you like the idea of like researching a lot, either in the science or the humanities, then definitely apply for the program. I had a really good time in my research, and my professor, as I've mentioned previously, was always super, super nice to me. So, you know, I think it's always worth giving it a shot, you know. Whether or not you think you're eligible for it or not, you know, it could never hurt to just try.
we both got distinctions for our research project. I'll like edit it in here. Yeah. And in retrospect, I do feel like the entire experience was really something that I'm very privileged to have experienced. Definitely, I have really enjoyed my time with my professor, my time researching. I'm sure Isaac can say the same, although not necessarily about labs.
It was a tiring process, but very rewarding nonetheless.
I guess the moral of the story that we're trying to get at here is that ultimately only do a H3 and only like undertake a very lengthy research project if you're very sure that it's something that you're going to be interested in, if it's something you're passionate about, because as Isaac has said or will say, it really will be the main force driving your project. Okay, so that's the end of this video. If you guys liked it, please subscribe down below and give it a big thumbs up. If you would like to, please follow us on social media. Isaac, where can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Isaac is the way.
You can find me on Instagram at fabulous_fullstop. All right, if you guys have any video suggestions or you'd like to see more videos like this, please leave it in the comments below and we will try to, I don't know, maybe we'll film another video.
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Have a great day. Bye.
Okay, question 2. What do you mean? How did you apply? Complications. Okay, I mean complications. Okay, question 2. Yeah, so actually when I was trying to get a place start again. Okay. Oh yeah, and when I was actually trying to get a professor to mentor me, I was in okay, never mind. Okay, start again. So I was actually in the US.
Another thing I might want to add as a tip is that if you have an NLB account, I mean, if not, you can definitely start one if you're a Singaporean citizen or PR. If you have an NLB account, you can go to e-resources and go to JSTOR through that, and you'll literally have access to a ton of journal articles. Of course, I don't think that JSTOR is the best website available just because this always happens to be like I will go search for this article and instead of finding the article, I will find like 200 reviews of that one article that I'm trying to search for. And so I get like this very strange case of like third-hand information whereby like I'm like piecing together what I know about this article from like the 2,000 reviews that I have found.